Lekon and I'm your software engineering instructor. In this session, we will be building a quiz app using React. Our quiz app was built previously, and this was how it looks like. This is how it looks like. It's on GitHub pages, and it was built using jQuery, HTML, and CSS and Bootstrap. So it asks you questions, you get to pick answers, and at the end of it all, it calculates your score and tells you how far you did. So we are interested in building this same functionality with React. So in this session, we will focus more on the functionality, and after, I expect you to style it the way you want. You can use this library. It's React Bootstrap if you want, or you can use other CSS libraries to make your work easier and faster. You can use things like Semantic UI or Materialize UI. Those are also recommended. All right, so we jump straight into the code and we do npx create React app. Then I call it Ninja Quiz React. Good. So I call this Ninja Quiz React, and let's start that. All right, so we started our app, and we just wait for some time for npx to build our boilerplate, create React app, and bring in the basic dependencies we need, install them. And yes, in just to reiterate again, in this tutorial we'll be reinforcing ideas of components, props, passing props around, passing props and functions, and states, and yeah, functional components and class components. Okay, good. This is also going to focus mainly on the functionality, and we will not do so much of a design, which I'll leave to you to uh, do uh, the way you want your design to be for your app. So I expect you to follow along as I go on through this tutorial. So I'll open up my ICD into my Niger quiz React app generated from create React app. Then I can do a code open. So we have our code base here, and yes, I just make that a little bit bigger. Then maybe so now the first thing is to delete the boilerplate generated code. They are really not needed. So yeah, I move those to trash. Then we can create our entry file here, that is the index.js. So in the index.js we start our code. So I can zoom a little bit so this gets bigger for you. I think that's better. Alright, good. So first thing we want to do is to import React, because we know that our package.json has the React uh, dependencies and React DOM. React and React DOM, they've been installed and they're in the node module, so we can do things like import React from React. Then we import React DOM from React DOM. Okay, good. Then the next thing we want to do is to tell React DOM to render. So we render a test div first, just to draw a hello world. Hello. Then we do a document that get element by ID, and we know our ID is root. That's what you we always get from React app. We can change the ID to whatever we want, but yeah, the ID generated from create React app is root for the div. This is where we load all of our results, HTML template that will be generated. Good. So let's just see how this is working. So we can just do a yarn start and I'll create React app. Then yeah, so our app is starting up. I mean, it's taking some time to load. Okay, good. So our app is up and running, and we have our hello div showing up. Cool. So we can now go straight ahead and start our quiz app. So first thing is that I want to structure this project in a way. So I create a folder where all my components are going to live. Then I also create another folder where uh, things like quiz data are going to live. I call this utils, and yes, I have those two folders. So here will be all my components, and here will be utility folder. That's the short form for utility. So instead of rendering this hello div, what we want to render is actually our Ninja quiz app. So I will import a component now. I call it Ninja quiz. uh, I don't have the component created yet, but I'm just going to create it after now. So the Niger quiz will be coming in from the components folder, and it's going to be named Niger quiz. Good. So then I can just render that um, component here. Good. Niger quiz. So the next thing to do is to just create the Niger quiz component here. Alright, nigerquiz.js. Okay, good. So in nigerquiz.js, what do we want to do? So this is just like another component. We we imported it here, then we just render it in here. It's empty right now, and it doesn't have anything in it. So we can just then start from and import React, and I'm going to use a syntax here, which is component from React. So this is just the same thing as the component you see here is just like taking the component key from the object you get from import React. So it's really something like this, React dot component actually. So but the short form syntax just to call it component instead of doing react.component is to just write a component just to get the same key from the React module. All right, good. So now I have React available in this page, and I have component also available in this page because we'll be using a class component here. All right, so the next thing I want to do now is to just export the export default Ninja quiz. Export this for Ninja quiz, and yes, it's not doing anything here, but we want to create a class component, so we can do class Ninja quiz extends from component. Alright, so this is just a short way of, instead of doing React or component, just the component. Good. Okay, then we open up curly braces and then we start. So we have the Ninja quiz class component here, and the important function is our render. So render, and in the render we return what we return for now. Could be, so we return our div, which is yeah. Alright, so now everything looks okay. We have this Niger quiz showing up here, and then we have I. So yeah, we have I showing up on the page, which looks good. Awesome. So the next thing we want to do is to import our quiz question. Alright, so I create a new file, then I call it question generator.js. Okay, good. Alright, so I created a question generator here. I actually have a bunch of questions already in the old Ninja Quiz app, which was created with jQuery. So I'm just going to go into the app now, and bring in some of those questions we already generated. So these are the old questions, and then I can just copy them from here and use them in the new question generator component. Awesome. So, but before I do that, the question generator component is going to be a simple function that has all the questions in it, but then it will do a bunch of things. It will randomly pick 5 out of the questions and return to the other client component that will be consuming it, and then it can also have a default variable. I will show some default variable pattern here, and then we will default the count, that is the number of questions we want to return, to be 5, which means that the user can actually change the number of questions to return to whatever number available. Okay, so we call the function question generator. So we have a count equals to 5. So when I do this, I'm using a default variable of 5. So count is the number of uh, questions I want to return. So I can have unlimited number of questions here, but when I call this function, I want to return only 5. All right. So, and the default is 5, but you can always change this parameter and call question generator like this. You can call question generator with 3, you can call it with 4, you can call it with 2, but you can also call it as it is with an empty variable, and when you do this, the count will be 5. So that's the idea of default variables. So then next thing you want to export default question generator. All right, so the the next thing I want to do is to create a constant that holds our questions, and that's just going to be the question array we looked at earlier, this one. All right, so I'm just going to copy this over from our old app and bring them all here. Okay, good. So we have them here, but that is not all. We say that we want this function to also do one more thing. So in the old app, the way we did the random generation was to get all the questions, then we sort, then we did this uh, the random selection based on we sliced to a number from 0 to 5. So we had coded it to be 5 here, but then we can do the same thing. So you can just do that and say return uh, so now we are going to run the same sort function on our questions. Yeah, questions, good. On choice question. Okay, so we run the same function on questions, we sort, and we return this just to pick some random numbers. This generates random numbers that are less than one. Then based on the size of the number, you get your question sorted. So we want to slice not 5, but we just want to slice the count instead. So we have a variable count coming in from here. So the default is 5. So you can also change the count to be whatever you want it to be. All right, good. We have these ones coming in now. And yeah, we can then import the questions in our quiz nigerquiz.js. So we can import question generator. Sorry. Yeah, it is question generator. Good. So we import our question generator from there, and yeah, we proceed from there. So we have all our questions in the Niger quiz class now, and the next thing we want to do is to proceed from there. So I will add an h1 here. H1 says, I don't know what was it? Do you know Nigeria? Something like that. All right, so okay, add my H1 here. Yeah, good. And now the next thing we want to do is to start to think about how we want to implement this actually. So uh, previously, so in the jQuery scripts we use for this, you will see we initialize some global variables. We call them score to be 0, question index is 0, and we are changing these variables as the user was selecting the questions and interacting with our app, but they were initialized as 0 initially. So the way we can achieve that in React here is to initialize with state. So um, we can set the initial state for these variables, the question index and the score, to be 0. Then we will be changing this state as the user interacts with the app. As you move from one question to the other, the question index will change and your score will also change depending on how you perform. So we can do that by calling the constructor. So we want to set the initial state for the app. So we do that in the constructor. So yeah, in constructor we can then do super. Normally, if you have props coming in, you should pass in props into the constructor, but I won't pass in props yet because I have not seen any need to uh, use props in this app yet. Okay, good. So just called super, and then we initialize the state. This state equals to, yeah, an empty object. So now the first thing we want to define as part of our state is the question list coming in from the question generator. So that is like a default of 5 questions coming in from here. So I can then just call question generator here, and then I call the function. Great. So then the next thing is to define the question index, initial value of 0. Then I define the score, the initial value of 0 also. Great. So yeah, we have our state, we have the index, we have this, and we have every other thing like this also. All right, great. So then the next thing is that since we have each of our questions coming in, but they are coming in as an object like this, we want to transform them into a, an actual element on the page for us to see. So one thing you can think now is, how do you select components on the page? Let's go back to this jQuery app, and let's try and pick out some components on this page already. So the first component is actually that I will see from the page is the question component that has the question itself, and then each of these options also could be a separate component. And by the time you are done with interacting with the quiz, you get a result component that tells you if you did well or you did not. All right, good. Yes, let's go back to our app. So we have some bunch of components already. We talked about just now the question component that holds the question itself, and the option. So each of these options can also be a separate component on their own, and the final component, which is the result, that tells you, oh, okay, this is your final result. Okay, good. So one thing we want to do initially is to set up our app so that we can turn all of our question object into the question component, but we don't have a question component. So first thing I do now is to just create the question component. Yes, I just import in here. Good. So I just import the question from there. So I have my list of question coming in as this state.question list. Then what I want to do now is, after here, I want to turn my questions into a component. So I'll create a function here. Uh, I call it show content, and I'll call the function as if it's already there. Alright, sorry, I made a mistake there. Okay, good. So the function does not exist yet, but the function here is just to show everything under this do you know Ninja. Then most of the things here is going to be rendered by this function. So, and the function is also going to sort of undo the interaction when you click on your option. All right, so then next thing is to define the show content function. Show content. Then when we have functions like this, it is important for us to bind the function to the actual this context of the whole component, so that we don't get bugs along the line, weird bugs. So you do something like, sorry, show content. So this dot show content will be equals to this dot show content dot bind this. Okay, good. So this dot show content equals this dot show content dot bind. So whenever you use this in the function show content, you are using this in the context of the whole class component here. That is, you have this the states, you have this the props if there are props there, and yes, good. So for now, we want to just return the question component, taking in the question we want to work on initially. So, or let me just do that now. For now, we return the question component. I haven't built my question component yet, but just let's just in a second I'm going to build my question component. So my question component can take in props like content, and in the content I have whatever question object I want to pass into the question. So the question component is supposed to take in this kind of object and transform it to look like a p tag, can turn this question to a paragraph tag, turn each of the options to maybe an input tag with a radio button. Yes, and that's just going to be what we want to do in the question component for now. All right, so the content, let's say the content now is just the first question. We want to return the first question. Is the state dot question list. Um, there, good. So in our question component, we define how that's going to look like. So good. We start from import React from React. Then this can be just a function uh, component. It doesn't have to be a class component, because we won't be handling states in this component. Oh, no. To uh, export default question. Okay, good. So then I define my function for the question component, but you can see from here I passed in some props here, and the name of the prop is content. So I am going to be using props in this function component. So I allow props to come in as a variable. Okay, I got the typo here. All right, good. So allow props to come in as a variable over there. Then yes, the most important thing in a function component is the return. So I want to return the template here, how I want it to look like. So I know the props as the content. So I can say let question body equal props the content. All right, good. So whatever the content of the question is will be added into this variable, and then I just want to return for now the question itself. So I can just do that by adding a p tag here. And in here I can just call question body dot question. So all right, so our question component is looking good for now. Let's see what we have on our page. Good. What is the population in millions? That's the first question. If I reload, okay, good. What is the capital city? So if you can see which is not a state now, you can see that the questions are also random. When I reload the page, it gives me like random questions coming up. All right, good. I think we have some progress there. All right, so the next thing is we go back to our Niger quiz, and we want to start to do some changes. So now we have our question being rendered, but this is not the end. We also want to render our option. So, like I said before, we will have a separate component also for the question options. So, yes, the questions are coming in. We have the questions there, but the options also have to be displayed in their own way. So, let me. So I have rendered the question here. Then the next thing will be to render the option also. So I will define a function, and the function here I will call it show options. Then I call my function here. So in here I can do a constant show options. Then I create an ES6 fat arrow function, and yeah. So what I want to do here is just to return the first option first. Yeah, from the question. So I want to return the first option, which is the question body. Question body dot options. I think, yeah, options. Then I just return options, then I pick the first one. Okay, good. So show options now just takes the first option and shows it on the page. Good, St. Peter's. If I reload the page, you see the first option, you see the first option. Good. So but we want to do something more. We want to render all of the options that are available. So the first thing is to now use the idea of the map function. So in here I just yeah, I can do a map function, and I can return each option as a paragraph tag. So then I can do map, I take in the option, and I take in the index also. So that now I want to return a p tag. All right, so in the p tag I just want to show the option. Good. So the map function here will take in each of this. I'm going to use this the index, later on when we have actual question option component, but I just want to demonstrate what we should expect using the map function, and eventually when we have our question option. Uh, so good. So when we did that, we get like a list of all the options, and we can reload. We see this is always changing, and we have all of our options shown. Good, but we don't just want to render our option with a p tag. We could do that if you want, but we can go a step further and create and import our question option component. We haven't created that yet, but we will do so in a minute. uh, Question option. All right, good. So we have the question option component here. So we haven't created it yet, so let's just do that now. Question option. Yes. Awesome. So we go back to our question. We have a question option JS coming in. So what we want to do eventually is to replace this p tag with the question option uh, element, and passing the option as props. Yes, the exact option as props into this element, and also we pass in the key. So React is able to optimize rendering for us. All right, so let's go into our question option. We define how our question option should look like. All right, so question option also does same thing. Import React from React. Then we do an export default question option. Yeah, good. We do our question option. Then we can just use a function component here also. We are not going to be using state here. Yeah, question option. Then we are going to be passing in some props, which is the value of the option this option is going to take. So you should think about it like the question option component is just going to be holding one option at a time. So we can get that option as the value. We can send in the props as the value into into the question option component. All right, so we then do let option value. So we call the option value, then we make this props the value. So yeah, question option value. So the important part of the function component is the return. We do a return, and yeah, we can return a div here. And so good. So we can return a div here now. And how do we want our option to look like? You can make it look like anything you want, but for me, I'll just make it an input. I create an input here. I give it a type and I call it a radio just to show that it's an option. You can actually select it, but the behavior is going to be totally different. All right, so we have a p tag here. Then you can close the p tag and you can then do so option value. So that is the actual value this option uh, component is going to hold. So what you expect to see is what we expect to see is a radio button. Then after the radio button, we expect to see the p tag that holds the value for the option, which is also like the name of the option, so to say. All right, so this is simple enough, but then I want to define an on-click. Yeah, so when a user clicks on the option, something is supposed to happen. For now, I will just make, sorry, that's a mistake. So I'll just make the on-click do a console.log. So we can just do an on-click here. Let's say that's this. Okay, good. Yeah, so for now the on-click is just going to do a props log of the value of the props. But later on, what we want to do is a little bit involved. So we want at every click we want to move to the next question, and also we want to score the user. So in this question, yeah, where we imported the question option, then we can replace this p tag with the question component. Get rid of the p tag, get rid of this option also, and because we are using the props, what's okay, so we are using props value here, so we have to define the props here as value, and so that is going to be option. Yeah, and I said for optimization, React knows which, because we have a lot of elements being generated with map here. So React needs a way to identify each of those elements separately. That's one important reason why we are using the key I. If you do not use the key I, you are going to get an error in your console. Not really an error, like a warning that tells you that it is not, your code is not optimal enough for React. All right, good. Let's see what we have here. Okay, good. We have the radio buttons. We have this uh, P tag also, or we have the question value coming in with the radio button. Good. So, and we remember we defined an on click. So the on click is supposed to, when I click on it, we want to log the value, which is working quite nice. Awesome. So we go back in here, then we start to think about how to complete this. So most of the components we need are already created. What we need to do now is to just solve the final problems we have at hand. All right, so one way we can do this is to go back to our Naija quiz app, and in there, when we show we have all of the questions here, but we want to score the user whenever the user clicks on each of these option components. Essentially, on click, we want a function to run in the on click here, but the function in the on click is supposed to do a couple of things that are related to the Ninja quiz state. And yeah, that is the score. We want to change the score. We want to also change the question index, because when we change the question index, the question that's being shown here automatically changes. Right. So one thing we can do is to pass down a function through the Ninja quiz component to the question option component. So I'll explain what I'm trying to do here. All right, so let's say our function to score each question, we call it score question. So of course it takes in the value, because we want to check if the value is correct or not. Then if it's correct, you get a good score. If not, you don't get anything scored for you. But for now, we just want to do a console.log score is, then we log the value. All right, so remember, we when we define functions like this, we also want to give it a correct this scope. Score question. All right, good. This dot score question dot bind this. Great, awesome. So we have this, but then we want to pass this down to our question option. So this is the function we want to run, but we don't want to run it except in the question option. So what we can do is to pass it through the question um, component, and just follow me carefully here. Uh, Score question. So we add another props here, and we pass in the score question function here. So we have another props here, score question, and the that is in the question component. Good. So now we have the question option in here, and we have the value, we have the key. We can then just pass in the score question from the props coming in here as another props here. So don't just, it's just one step after the other. You might have to look at this again a little bit, but then you passing from props, score question. Good. So the score question props coming in from the question component is now passed into the question option. Why? Because I don't want to trigger the function until I am here. So in here now I have the question, the score question function now. Then I can pass in the exact value. Remember, the function score question actually takes in a variable that is the value of the options selected. Then, but here we are not calling the function, we are just passing the function just like we are passing any other uh, element, just like a string, an object. So props the score question. Good. Yeah, so now in here you have the props the score question, and then instead of this console.log called with props the value, what I want to do is to just call props dot score question here. So I call props dot score question here with the same props dot value, and because it's now available in my props through the question, through the Ninja quiz. Great. So, but you see, in what does the score question function does? It just does a console.log score is whatever value. All right, good. Our page should reload, or we can reload it as we want. Then let's click it so you can see that that mechanism is working. Our score is delta, that is the value we passed in here. Perfect. So this means that we can do a lot of things here. We can do things like grade the question, grade question. You just want to check if the value, sorry, grade answer. So we just want to check if the value is the same thing as the correct answer. Then we increase the states score. Exactly. So when we increase the state score, we also want to um, what else do we want to do? We want to increase the question index states. Increase question index states. All right, good. So we increase the score. We increase the question index state. We only increase the score if the answer is correct. Good. So let's start from the reverse, that is increase the question index state. So but before then we can just say let the question, that is the current question the user is selecting, we can get that from our list of questions that is in the question list. Yes, the question list, and then we have a state for the question index. This is the question index. This is the, sorry, it should be this the state the question index. Yeah, this is the state the question index. So we have the exact question from this list, from this array of questions based on the question index. Good. All right, so then the next thing is you want to change the states. This is a set state. I believe you know this function. This the set state is to change the value of any of these initial states we already set. So this is the set state. Then we pass in a function. Pass the function takes in state. Then we declare a function here. All right, so yeah, what we want to do in this the set state is to return a new state. Essentially, we want to return a new state, how our state should look like, which should be all of this except the we should be all of this. So we can then do, yeah, we should be, but if we do this, then our question generator will give us another set of random answers which we do not necessarily want, and we'll be repeating ourselves again and again. And one thing we also want to do is to make sure that this is state dot question index plus plus. So this is just the only thing we need to do. Every other thing remains the same. We just want to increment the question index by one. So there is a short form of doing that if you only want to change one part of the state and you want every other thing to remain the same thing. So I'll just show you how to do that right now. So then just get rid of all this. You don't really need to do all this. There's a short, but I was just showing that to see what the short form command will look like. So the short command is just like this. So you do an ellipsis of three dots, then you do a state dot question index plus plus. So every other thing remains the same in this state, but your state, that is your current state, the question index from the current state is incremented by 1 with the plus plus. So it returns every other thing in this object. It's just the question index is no longer 0, then it's 1. Then the next time it gets to 2, just like that, and increment by 1 every time you run this function. Okay, good. We've been able to increase question index state. Then the next thing we want to do is to check for the answer, and after we check for the answer, we affect the state also, and this time around we'll affect the score state. All right, great. So what we want to do is simple in here. We just want to check if a value, that is the value coming in here, is equal to the question, because we defined the question already here, dot answer. I think, yeah, because the question generator, you can go back there, see how it looks like. So you have the question coming here and you have the answer here. Awesome. So if it is equal to question and answer, then what next thing we want to do is to set state. Then yeah, so what we want to do is to do a set state. Then what we are changing in the state is just the score. So we want to do something exactly like this, but now it's just going to be that we are incrementing our score by 1. So it's not going to be question index, but it's going to be state dot score. It's as simple as that. So good. So here we increase the score by 1 if your value, your answer is correct. And if it's not correct, we do not do anything. Your score remains 0. All right. Looks like this function is ready to go, doing everything it should do. So the beautiful thing about React is that immediately we change this state and we increment the state by 1, we can change the question being rendered. So React always will render the page whenever the state changes. That's what I'm trying to say. So whenever the state changes and it affects what is being shown on the page, React is smart enough to re-render the page. So the way we did that in jQuery was to actually uh, tell JavaScript to clean up everything, then render what we want to show, clean up everything, render the question again, do all this. create the input for all the options. So it was really verbose and uh, it was a lot. But React is smart enough such that if we pass in the correct state instead of the index 0, because now presently we're just showing the first question, we can change that by showing the question based on the question index state, because there we are increasing the state. So you can just do something like this dot state dot question index. Good. So the question index starts from 0 here. Then whenever you pick an option, we are running the score question function, and this changes. So when this changes, this state changes, this is going to change. Then the question is also going to change automatically by React. So that's a good good thing by React re-rendering. All right, good. So we get our page running. So React sometimes expects you to use a triple equal, but I'm just using the double equal equal. Okay, so uh, which is not the state. So let's try to run our app based on some of the things we've done. Well, our expectation is that when we click on the option, we run this function, which changes the state of the question index, which should automatically change the question being rendered. And we can also see that our score is also changed. All right, now let's do that. So you see, when I pick that, the the question is changing, but then at the end I get a, an error when I pick the last question. And also, if you notice, my input button was not being cleared off, it just been added to it. So we have to fix those two things now. And at the end of the day, I get an error here, cannot with question of undefined. The error is just because that we've exhausted the 5 questions that we are supposed to have, and we are now incrementing the states here also, and we can pick 5. We don't have the question for the next index. So that means that we need a way to stop the quiz game when our questions are exhausted. Good. So one way, so we stop the quiz game when the questions are exhausted, and the next thing we do is to show our result page. So I already said that, but this is where we are going to do that. So we can do that in here in the show content, because we are calling show content here. That's where most of the question interaction is happening. So let's just create a new result component that's going to hold our final result page. All right, so we have a result component, then we import our result component from here. Import result from. Good. So we have our result component here. So what we want to do is to do a check. If the questions are exhausted, then we will show the result page, and if not, we continue to show the question. All right, so a very easy way to get that done is to do a check. We check for we check for our present index, and we see if the length of the question list still matches or not. All right, so what we do this now is to just check if the length is, if the question index is less than the length of our question, or yeah. So what I mean by that is that we check the state, because we're always incrementing state now. So the question index value is always increasing, but we don't want to render a question that we don't have. So just check if the question index is less than the length of the question list. Question list, the length. Good. So we check if it's less than the question list. Then we render the question. If it's not less than the question list, then the function returns. So this is just like an implicit else statement. So the question just result the results. Yeah. Okay. So it just returns the results, and then in the results we want to pass in the score. So because depending on your score, we want to show you either you have a success or you have a fail. Yeah, this dot state dot score. Great. So we have this. If you check if the question index is this is less, then we keep on showing the question. If this is not satisfied, then we have to return the result. Okay, great. So at this point we will now go into our result component to make our desired changes, how we want our results to look like. For now, in the result component, we just do something as simple as just showing the score, but I will expect you to go further and improve. Oh, my bad. Okay. Yeah, so I'll expect you to go further to just improve the app generally and add some styling also, but the main functionalities are already added. All right, so in the result we import React from React, then we also just use a function component here, function result, because we're going to be passing in the props of the final score. We add some props here, then we export results. Good. So in our function, for now, what I'll just do is to just return the div. Okay, so in the div I can just do return props.score, right? Okay, good. So I just return the score here, but you can add some images, gifs, whatever you think. You can get as creative as you want to show the results to your end user from there. All right, so we go back in here. So we are showing the result when your score is being added. So good, let's see how this then look like on our final app. All right, so good, we have this. So I click on this. So you should also note that the way the question option function, the on click is on the div, not just on the input radio button. And actually, you can get rid of this input radio button and add something else like a checkbox. You can add an image, you can add a PNG image or whatever you want there. But you should note that the on click is not just on the input or the p tag. The on click is on the whole div as it is. So whenever I click on the div that includes this and the radio button, you get your score evaluated by the score question function. All right, so we go on. Then you see the score is 1. Then I can reload the page. Everything seems to be working correctly. So what is the year of independence? I do this correctly. Anti-system, what is the capital city? That is Abuja. Which was the first ever capital city? That is Lagos. Which is not a state in Nigeria? That is Accra. Which was the first mobile telecom network? I think should be this one. Then I get a score of 5. Perfect. So in this lesson, you've seen how we created the basic functionality of a quiz app game. The important thing is around the functionality where we are to pass in the score question through the props. We created various components for the different parts of the application. I will expect you to style this application and also give a proper result message to your end user. See you in the next class. Bye.